this is great. I'm so glad we got together for this.
Thanks.
And I want to start with who you are. And then I want to go with what you do, a little bit about your company,
Okay.
and how you guys do it, because you do it different than a lot of companies. And then the most important part, I want to get to the why. But first, just kind of an intro. I've introduced people before and I always butcher it and get it wrong. So I'm going to let you say who you are and introduce yourself based on kind of your own values and who your own personal identity.
My name is Tom King. I am the founder and CEO of Icon Foods. We are an ingredient supplier to companies that have an initiative to clean label sugar reduction, and that means that they are reducing the amount of sugars in their consumer goods, and they're doing it with ingredients that consumers can understand, like stevia, monk fruit, erythritol, allulose. So that is my primary function. I wrote a book that came out in May of last year. So it's been out about a year. It's called Guy-Gone Keto. And then I selfishly made the condiments because I couldn't have ketchup, I couldn't have barbecue sauce. There wasn't really any options for condiments.
Yeah.
So since I'm a food scientist, I went into my lab and I just made them. And then everybody who had them said, "Oh, these are really great. You should sell these at retail." So we got packaging and have a third party who does our fulfillment, but we manufacture them in house, and that's what we do.
Great. Awesome. So Icon Foods came first and then Icon Keto, right?
Yeah, it did. And Icon Foods got spawned from my retail company called Staviva Brands. So I started a company called Staviva Brands in 1999 after I ran into this guy who came back from Paraguay with stevia leaves.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "Hey, you should try these out." And I tried them. I was blown away by how sweet they were. So in their natural state, they're about 25 times sweeter than sugar. And at that point, what came up for me is, wow, if we can find a way to extract those sweet constituents from these leaves, in a natural way, this would make a really great replacement for like aspartame and sucralose. So my goal was to start a consumer brand and sort of parlay the consumer brand equity into an ingredient company. And so my first company was Staviva Brands, and we're in maybe 2,500 different stores and Whole Foods.
Mm-hmm.
But it really took off when we got focused on ingredient sales.
I love it. And
Thanks.
I love how on your website you say, real success isn't just about making money, it's about doing some good.
Yeah, I mean that's my underlying philosophy, because I mean I came from a Fortune 100 background where I was an executive, and I don't slight people for pursuing those types of careers, but it wasn't for me because I didn't feel like I was really being authentic to myself, and I couldn't see how I was doing any good or making a difference in the world, and so I wasn't really happy with the potential legacy that I would leave.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, then yeah, I'm like, I got to get out of this crap. And yeah, and so I mean, what drives me is not so much like the monetary success, because I just use that to build more companies and
Yeah.
create more stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, the thing that really drives me is number one is making an impact in the world. Like when I get emails from people and they're like, "Oh my God, I lost 75 pounds and I've never felt better." And I mean, that's super rewarding. But the other thing that's like even more rewarding is when you hire a person and they start as an entry level, and the next thing you know, I mean, they're just crushing it. And it's cool to be the catalyst behind their self-combustion.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. And I love your mission of curing metabolic disease and specifically diabetes, as you call it.
There's a lot of that. And I mean, what's crazy is I see more and more and more. And, I was having a conversation with my sister, the other day, and I think I was being a little hypercritical because it seemed I was walking in downtown Portland, and it's like I really could not believe the amount of like Gen Zs and millennial and mostly women that are carrying a lot of extra weight. And so I was talking to her on the phone, and I'm like, I think this fat thing is in. I think that this is a thing. Like, it's in. It's to be, if you're stylish. And then, a friend of mine is like, yeah, well, that's called being thick, and thick is a thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's not a good thing, I mean, because as they get older, they're going to have a really hard time getting that weight off.
Yeah.
But I almost see, like, I don't know, a bit of a metamorphosis in sort of human physiology. And it seems like they're probably borderlining. If you looked at a BMI, they're probably borderlining on obese. And while that may be the thing and may be attractive right now, when they start suffering the real health effects of metabolic disease, like increased blood pressure, potential diabetes, that's when things are going to get serious. When things get serious, when somebody loses a toe.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I tell people it's like running at red line.
Yeah.
Your engine can only do that so long, and when you've got this huge load of all tissue and all this extra digestion from the wrong foods, you're running a red line, and pretty soon, your engine's going to blow up, and that's your pancreas in your body, and then boom, you got diabetes.
Right. And so, are you finding the same thing? Because you do training, right? I mean, that's your thing. So, I mean, are you finding the same thing that Gen Z and millennials, like, are carrying a lot of extra weight? Is this just Portland?
I have noticed that. And the fascinating thing is even the sizes have changed. So a size 4 dress in a dress shop is not what it was 20 years ago.
Oh.
Those two size 4s and the modern size 4 is bigger. It's still the same number, but they've crept up in sizes. So as people get bigger, they can still be a size 4. And I noticed it first when about 5 years, when I was down in Mexico on the beach. I was walking around, and there were like 2 out of 100 people that were really lean.
Yeah.
And 5 years before that, it was 20 out of 100 people.
Wow.
And I was walking, and it's a spring break, and so I'm looking at all these people and these kids running around. I call them kids because I'm 53. And
wow, holy crap, you look good.
Oh, thanks.
Never in a million years guess that. I thought you were in your 30s.
Oh, yeah. Go on.
Yeah. You're doing something right.
Thanks. Well, like you are. I mean, it's
nice.
Yeah, and everyone else is aging really fast. They're looking older than their age, and these kids are running around, and most of them are overweight. They have these puppies, and they got this extra, but yet I see how they're acting with each other, and that's, I can tell that the guys think these girls are hot, and they're 25-30% body fat, and 10 years earlier, hot was different, and so we're shifting, and so it's kind of like what you're saying, which is really fascinating to me.
It is fascinating. And I mean, I don't want it to sound judgy, because I think one of there's sort of an upside and kind of a beautiful side of it. And that is their level of self-acceptance, because, they're comfortable with the way they look. And I think that, like, body consciousness is pretty destructive. So I'd say the upside is they're super comfortable, and it's like, great, not my thing, but you know what? Go for it. But I think that we're going to start seeing an issue, like in, 20 years from now. So when they're in their 40s, and when they just can't get rid of the weight because they've shifted hormonally.
Right. And I think you'd agree, it's about health. And women can be 25 to 30% body fat and still be healthy. And men can be even 20% body fat and still be healthy.
Yeah.
And women can also be too lean and be very unhealthy.
Right.
Which we see a lot of the extremes nowadays, where it really should be more in the middle, which would be the optimal.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I see several different sweeteners on iconfoods.com, and it sounds like the stevia was kind of the first one. I see erythritol on there. I see allulose. And so how has that evolved over time and changed? for you?
Well, so yeah, I mean, I started with stevia, and stevia is, I mean, it's a great sweetener, and technology has come a long way. So, in the beginning, things, stevia had a lot of off notes that a lot of people had a hard time tolerating. Like off notes of like bitterness or licorice, and a lot of that's been uh, sort of addressed through different types of filtration. But one of the things about stevia is it's usually 200 to 300 times sweeter than sugar. So if you're using it in baking or using it in anything where you need to have some volume
Mhm.
or even mouthfeel, and what I mean by mouthfeel is like a certain level of viscosity. Like when you drink a sugary drink, it's almost like syrup. So mouthfeel is like that sort of syrupy thing. So, and then also functionality too, like sweeteners that participate in Maillard, which is the function of proteins and sugars that causes caramelization. So as we grew the company, we needed to address things that were functional, and then also things that that also would create volume. So that was, I mean, so one of our first sweetening blends was just a blend of stevia and erythritol, and that was super popular. And then we bought equipment to be able to adjust particle sizes, so we were able to have something that was very close to confectionery sugar. And that's when things blew up for us, because a lot of the bar manufacturers, they were using like an extrusion process, which is basically like when you see somebody making pasta, where it's pushed through like a small aperture.
Yeah.
That's kind of how a lot of the bars are made, with that sort of extrusion process. And so they're uncooked. So you need like a really fine powder sweetener that that disperses into your solution.
Huh.
So that's where real strong points came in. And then we found a way to uniquely extract monk fruit. So monk fruit is probably the latest, and I guess by some people's definition, the greatest high intensity sweetener. I mean, it also has some off notes, but they're mostly reminiscent of like melon rind, so they're pretty
Yeah.
mild. But when you start mixing the two, like stevia and monk fruit,
Mhm.
they've got some interesting masking properties that mask off each other's off notes. But
Interesting.
with masking, you also lose sweet intensity, so you have to use more. Um, but I would have to say that out of all the sweeteners that we have, allulose is probably the most exciting one for me. I've worked with allulose for the past 5 years. The FDA released guidelines about a month ago stating that you can move the allulose out of added sugars, so it
Wow.
doesn't show up as an added sugar, which is great for food manufacturers. But I think for me personally, the allulose is really interesting because I noticed that it actually will slightly suppress blood sugar levels
Wow.
and increase ketones,
Wow.
and which was really cool. Like, how is this happening? And so, I mean, I read a lot of research papers on it and a lot of science, and there's a little bit of the enzyme or the bacteria that's used to create um, allulose. So allulose is actually made from fructose,
Yeah.
and then they just ferment fructose. So think wine, cheese, beer, things that are fermented. So they ferment like a fructose substrate with this particular bacteria that then converts the fructose to allulose, and your body is unable to metabolize it.
That's so
Um,
cool. So kind of like how erythritol is fermented from other sugars, allulose is fermented from fructose.
Right. So with erythritol, that's actually, they use an enzyme with a glucose, like a corn glucose substrate.
That's
So, and then the metabolite, what's left over, I'd think of it as like the yeast's byproduct or their waste or their poop or whatever. That's the metabolite. So the metabolite is erythritol, and in the case of the enzyme that we add to fructose, the metabolite is allulose, which is about 70% as sweet as sugar. It still functions as a saccharide or a sugar, which means it browns, it caramelizes, it even ferments. So, like if you eat too much of it, you can get gas because it'll start fermenting. So I'm really super curious about the actual bacteria that you know that's metabolizing allulose in vitro in your body. Um, yeah, I'm super curious about it. I haven't been able to track it, like which particular bacteria it is, because I haven't seen an overgrowth or any die-offs or anything. But it's pretty interesting because I have dosed myself up to like 100 grams,
Whoa.
and I was pretty gassy. Well, I've dosed myself to 100 grams of erythritol, and it was like, I won't do that again.
No.
But I do this. I do this because I mean I have, you know, like I have lots of customers that want me to reformulate with them, and some of them will be like, oh, we'll just put in erythritol to like 50 grams, and I'm like, you don't want to do that
No,
because
no.
you know having too much erythritol
Yeah.
is unpleasant.
The erythritol doesn't typically, it bothers me the least of all the talls.
Oh yeah.
But one time I made frosting out of erythritol.
Oh,
It was a big dose, big mistake.
nice.
So, man, I had to win something fierce. I was it, never going to do that again. But hey,
Well,
so the difference. I
yeah.
know
Go ahead.
on
Sorry.
your website, I was looking at the allulose and the erythritol, and
Mhm.
it looks like allulose has another benefit of slowing down or retarding carb absorption or
Yes.
oxidation, which
Yep.
the other talls don't have,
Right.
which is kind of cool.
It is, but they're two different things. So allulose, if it ends in OSE, it's a sugar. So allulose is a saccharide. Um, and with erythritol, erythritol is considered a polyol. So when you have things that end in OL like that, like polyol or I mean like erythritol or mannitol or sorbitol, those are all classified as alcohol sugars or polyols. And so they they function completely different in your system. They don't um, they don't metabolize the same way as a saccharide does. And part of the reason that people will occasionally get a stomach ache or diarrhea or gas from a polyol is really based on molecular weight. So it has a higher molecular weight. So when it gets into your lower intestine, it has the ability to actually draw moisture in. So that's the function of polyols. With the allulose, it's a completely different animal, like completely. So, I mean, it's still considered a saccharide. And then as far as it, you know, aiding in in your metabolizing or digesting carbohydrates, that's a big function of the enzymes that are left behind. They suppress carbohydrate absorption.
Wow, that is so cool.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. And I mean, and it's different in its effect because like if you have a polyol like erythritol,
Yeah,
you'll notice a cooling effect on your tongue.
yeah,
And so the cooling effect is actually molecular heating. So
yeah.
it seems like, okay, this seems like it's cooling, but it's not. So think about evaporation. Like if you put alcohol in your skin,
Yeah.
it feels super cool. Like, whoa, but that's a function of evaporation. It evaporates so fast that it's actually molecular heating and the byproduct is cooling. So that's what you get from erythritol because it is a polyol or alcohol sugar. With allulose, it's a completely different situation because you don't get that cooling effect from it. It's pretty neutral, you know, in its flavor, and it participates in Maillard. It caramelizes, you
Yeah.
know, completely two different species.
So theoretically, if someone has to eat a hamburger with the bun
With the bun.
and they have some of your ketchup with it,
Mhm.
it could potentially slow down or stop some of those bun carbs from being absorbed. Correct?
Some, not many. I would lose the bun. The
Yeah.
bun's not going to do you any good. And so here's the thing. Like I just read this one research paper, and it was pretty obvious. Like you know, it was about a diet, and they did this experiment with mice, a diet that was high sugar, high fat.
Yeah.
And so a high sugar, high fat diet is going to be far more detrimental than if you either have just a high sugar diet or just a high fat diet. But what happens
Yeah.
is that most of the sugars are metabolized by your liver.
Yeah.
So if you're eating a bun or you're eating something that, has fructans or fructose, or, which if it has any sugar at all, like sucrose is just like the blend of fructose and glucose. So your stomach actually digests glucose and gives you a straight shot. That's what creates the an insulin response. But fructose is actually metabolized by your liver. So if you're eating carbs and you've got like a lot of, or if you're eating too much protein even, and your liver has to work very hard on metabolizing that, fructose or the carbs that are coming in,
Yeah.
it's not going to metabolize the lipids or the fats that you're bringing into your system.
Right.
It's going to go to its quickest source of energy, which is going to be sugars, and it's going to metabolize those. Then it's going to look at the fat, and it's like, yeah, you know what? We're just going to put this in storage, for when we're chased by a saber-toothed tiger or something.
Yeah, exactly. Now,
So lose the bun.
Yeah, exactly. And here's the thing I'm most excited about. See, I used to eat teriyaki chicken all the time, but now that I'm keto, I don't, because there's so much sugar in it.
Right.
Now I haven't even opened this yet because I'm really delayed gratification, and this is going to be the last thing I open.
Oh, good.
I'm really looking forward to that the most because I want my teriyaki back. And
nice.
It's so cool to have a sugar-free teriyaki sauce that I'm really excited about.
Once you're through with that, I know a guy who can get you some more.
Okay. Hey, one more thing, just an aside, and we'll get back to the teriyaki that just popped into my head. These bags are so cool. And it's got a little valve in here that's a one-way valve, and so it's super clean. It doesn't get all over everything. You don't have to clean it when you're done. I love your design. And I like it so much that one of the products that I finished, I think it was a barbecue sauce, I rinsed it out and kept the bag because I'm going to use it for my travel shampoo container.
Oh.
Because it's going to be great to just squeeze out. It might be a little bit barbecue shampoo, but I think I rinsed it well enough for that not to happen.
I'll throw some bags in. I'll throw some bags in for you so you can have that. So thank you for your compliments on the bags. The bad news is we're actually going to move from those bags.
Okay.
So, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
So number one, they're super hard to fill. I mean, we could figure it out and we could probably get super scalable. Like right now we could probably do 1,000 units an hour, which is okay, but it's not going to meet demand.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, so we can invest in like a bigger filling system, but then we started getting so many complaints about the bags. And the complaint is this. So you take the top off and then there's a little ring that you pull, to get at the product, and then you put the cap back on. We're having some customers that are holding the bag and squeezing the bag while they open that little ring. And from where we come from, it's like, okay, so the customer's always right. But I've had so many people like, loved your product, it ended up all over my shirt. Or loved your product, but it squirted all over my house when I opened the lid. What do you do with that? Like I could just be like, well, that's user error and it's not very smart. You understand how displacement works. So we're actually going to be moving to a bottle. It's going to be a PET bottle, and it's a non-leaching PET bottle that that's going to be just perfect for people that don't want to squirt teriyaki sauce all over themselves.
Oh, excellent. I love that. I know I want to respect your time, and we're at the end of our time, but that was fantastic.
Oh,
and
thanks.
So many products. I could talk with you all day about all the products, your biohacking, your passion for getting people cured from metabolic disease and diabetes and all that stuff. And I just love what you're doing. And I'm such a fan of your mission. And I just totally support it. And really excited about your flavors too. I'm blown away at how good your stuff taste, because
Thank you.
I've tried tons of other things. You know, I've been keto for 10 years and
Wow.
tried it all. And there's a lot of really bad stuff out there, and yours is right up there in my favorites. So
No,
thank you for that.
I appreciate that. So you've been keto for 10 years?
Yeah.
Are
Well,
you
before they really named it keto, I mean, I was just
Atkins?
high fat, low carb.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was, yes, it was Atkins, but doing it the organic way.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm not just overdosing on conventional bacon all the time.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And Atkins was heavy, way too heavy in protein.
Yes.
So,
Right.
I mean, I get asked that a lot. It's like, oh, that's just Atkins. I'm like, well, I mean, Atkins could put you into keto, but it could also take you out if you're eating too much protein.
Right.
So here's the question. So if you've been doing keto for 10 years, do you ever go off keto?
I do. I'm cyclic. So,
Okay, good.
and so some people do it once a week. You know, Dr. Mercola has
Yeah.
really good stuff on that.
Yeah.
And he recommends once a week, but I take my ketone measurement and my glucose measurement, and I use the glucose ketone index, the GKI,
Yeah.
to see if I'm in ketosis. And when I've been in ketosis according to the GKI for 5 days, then I pull out and I eat some carbs and I pull myself out and then I go back in.
Gotcha. And then like what kind of carbs do you introduce then?
Oh, maybe I'll have some sushi, you know, with some
Okay, with rice.
resistant starch. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So it's mostly rice, and do you ever go grains at all?
Yeah. No, actually, I'm grain free, and I always will be.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But do some rice. I'll do some siete chips. You know, some cassava flour, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about like sweet potatoes and yams?
I would. I just don't like them.
No? And squash?
Yeah, squash for sure. Yeah. I'll
Okay.
do squash, definitely. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I I went 3 years keto
Mhm.
and never went off keto.
Yeah.
And what I found is that I didn't really have very good metabolic flexibility
Yeah.
because when I introduced carbs back in,
Yeah.
I put on easy 5 pounds, probably closer to 7 pounds. And I'd be like, and granted, it was probably mostly water,
Yeah.
but still my body was like, okay, this isn't, this isn't working.
Well,
And
yeah.
so now every couple weeks, I'll
Good.
go off.
Good. And it is important to be metabolically flexible because
Yeah.
all our cells are hybrid engines and they burn glucose and they burn fat and ketones. And
Mhm.
so I think we should be able to keep that ability. And so
Yeah.
that's why I tell people who have been keto for a year,
Mhm.
now start doing cyclic.
Gotcha.
So
Yep.
your body remembers how to burn both fuels.
Yep. 100%. Awesome. So sorry, I just said that. When you
No,
said
that's
10
great.
years, I was like, holy crap, that's a long time to be
Yeah.
keto.
I'm going to put your links, you know, in the
Great.
description and all the posts
Awesome.
and everything. GuyGoneKeto.com,
Yeah.
iconfoods.com.
Nice.
And I'll put your Facebook links for both of those.
Great.
Anything else? Any other social links?
You could link Staviva.com.
Okay.
That's our consumer line. And then I'm continually adding more stuff too. So
Yeah.
it's like we've got a line that we're going to be calling Keto Bandito. So it's a line of like pretty high fat salsas. So
Great. I love it.
Yep. There's a lot. Bake mix. I actually had waffles last month with our bake mix. So it was super solid.
And what's the best way to keep up on your new products? Is it your Facebook or is it the website?
Probably Instagram.
Instagram.
I mean, so I'll post a lot of stuff on Instagram or Twitter.
Great.
I do some on Facebook, but we've got a new marketing director that's starting next week. No, week after next.
Awesome.
And that we'll really ramp up a lot on our social media.
I love it. Wow. Tom, thanks so much for your time in this interview. And
oh, it's my pleasure.
Post it and spread the love. Let other
Yeah,
people
definitely. And if you make it down to Portland, let me know.
Yeah, we'll do. I do sometimes. Yeah. Awesome.
Okay. We'll grab a steak.
Excellent. With your steak sauce, right?
Yeah, that steak sauce, that's probably my favorite. That's the one I use the most. And like I like ribeye, And usually I'm like, no, I'm not going to put any sauce on a ribeye. That's just sinful. But I got to tell you, it's like the steak sauce that's my favorite. I
I
think it's the most
love it.
solid, followed by the teriyaki.
I love it.
Nice. Cool.
Okay, thanks again.
Awesome. Thanks, PJ.
Okay,
Have a great day.
you too.